of Ocala, Florida. He's got something shaken and stirred. Got a great show today here on the Friday College Football Roundtable. Doug Dean checks in from Birmingham. Dave Tompkins on special assignment. Frank Duffy's still trying to buy a thoroughbred up in Saratoga. They're off today, but we got a great one. Rick Cleveland, legendary sports columnist, longtime writer for the Jackson Clarion Ledger, and now writing for Mississippi Today. 13 times he was recognized as Mississippi Sports Writer of the Year. If you watch these documentaries on the SEC Network about college football in the South, you've seen Rick Cleveland. He's one of the ones, the Buddy Martins, the Tony Barnharts, Ron Higgins, those type writers that God love them. We need them writing for 100 more years. We'll be with you for the next hour and change. Smash the subscribe button in the bottom right-hand corner. Allow notifications on your Android and iPhone. Get pen and paper handy, because at some point we're going to touch on all 16 SEC schools, and it's a lot of fun doing it. And smash that QR code, Brendan.
Yeah, smash the QR code, not just the subscribe button. Smash the QR code. If you're in chat and you don't get to see it, you can go into the chat room on YouTube or any of the other chat rooms and hit that subscribe link as well.
Yeah.
It'll take you right to our YouTube player. Hit for free and you are in.
That's right. All right.
How you
and we are 192 hours away from the start in Dublin, Ireland, God's country. Georgia Tech, Florida State, 360 hours away from week one of college football. Because here we come.
Let's go. Let's
Sidelines with Rob Brown. Talk sporty to me.
I think you're muted, Mr. Brown. How are you, Rick Cleveland? Welcome to the show as Rob unmutes himself.
There we go.
See how I do that? I just step in like that. You can't teach it. You can't teach it. It only comes from the son of a sports writer.
That's right.
That's how you know. That's how you know.
I'm one of them.
Are you the son of a sports writer?
Oh yeah. Yes,
I didn't know that. Really?
Yeah.
Now,
my dad was Ace Cleveland. When I was born, he was a sports editor of the Hattiesburg American. He later came to Jackson and was at the Jackson Daily News, and then he went into the SID side of it at Southern Miss. Yeah. So.
Wow.
I am the son of a sports writer.
I tell you what, Rick, I think Doug Dean's on with us now. I think what would be your dream Saturday morning? I remember George Lapidus saying this on his show. He goes, got up, had an early breakfast, hit the road, drove to Tuscaloosa, went down to see Coach Bryant, sat in his office for better half of a day, and just took a lot of notes. Wouldn't that be fun to be able to do that again?
Oh yeah. Well, when I was 17, it was I was working for the Hattiesburg American, going to school at Southern, and they were about to play Alabama, and they sent me over to Tuscaloosa to do something on Bryant, and I had that was the game after they unveiled the wishbone.
Wow.
In the LA Coliseum. I had a flat tire on the way over there. I was late. Oh, good old Charlie Thornton got me. He said, Coach is eating lunch. You got 10 minutes by yourself. And about an hour and a half later, he took me out to practice and up to on his tower. It's one of the highlights of my life.
That is cool.
Unbelievable. Yeah.
Well, and it's the relationships, and that's how you got to know the coaches. And you're still writing. It's like architects, CPAs, attorneys, doctors, writers. You really never can stop. And you are a Southern Miss grad. You covered Southern Miss, Ole Miss, Mississippi State. Again, I've seen you on a number of documentaries. You have such a grasp of the history and the significance of what football means to people, kind of like Shelby Foote and you. You both understand what it means in the state of Mississippi. And Doug Dean is another great writer. He does his own thing, but I want to get Doug involved with this because we do a round table on Fridays. But the stories and then writing those stories, that's a talent from God, and it's just you can't make it up. You got to earn it, and you've done that.
Yeah. Well, you just got to. There's no way to learn to do it except doing it.
Yeah.
I started I was 13 when I started working part-time at the Hattiesburg American, worked through high school and college there. Yeah, different days, boy. We don't quite have the access we used to have, do we?
No. Doug, jump in here.
Good morning, guys. Rick's honored to be on the round table with you, sir. And I think it may bring a smile to your face that even before Rob let us know that you were going to join us on the show this morning, I've been trying to go a little beneath the obvious in the SEC being how will Texas and Oklahoma fare? Are Bama and Georgia still, is it rinse and repeat that nobody can beat them very often? And then I think, Rob, before the show is out, I want to also talk about LSU that curiously, I think they're being overlooked. And before the season's out, you wouldn't say that Mizzou is overlooked because they're getting hyped maybe too much. But the Magnolia State's on my mind, Rick, and that's kind of in your wheelhouse, right? And so
Yeah,
if I were you, I would really enjoy writing about, but I don't have a Magnolia State audience, just what I do. The dynamic between Ole Miss being seemingly, and with good reason, with what Kiffin's done, their roster, Ole Miss kind of on top of the world, and it's 12-team playoff or bust when I talk to my hotty-toddy friends. Meanwhile, quietly over there in Starkville, they've hired Jeff Lebby that, for my money, it's a little shorter resume as a OC and a head coach now, but I think Lebby can match Lane Kiffin in terms of offensive genius. They're very different. Kiffin's been in more really big games, arguably. He hasn't won as many of those as he would like, but do you agree with me that in the state of Mississippi, which is loaded with talent, maybe not at the numbers that a Georgia or Florida has, but there are a lot of great players in the state of Mississippi every year, that Mississippi State is going to be lifted up by Ole Miss? When it happened with Auburn in 2010, when Saban was on top of the world, you up your game. You get alumni and boosters committed to things. You try to you seal the state and get as many of your in-state players as possible. Are you as bullish as me? Not this season so much, but over the next several years for Mississippi State, Rick?
Well, I think obviously, I think Lebby is I think he's a really good football coach. He's starting out, in my opinion, he's starting out so far behind right now where Kiffin is. I mean, you can say a lot about Kiffin, and people surely have, but man, he has gotten out front on the portal, and they really are loaded. I mean, I'm trying to find a weak spot. I guess you would say maybe compared to the Alabamas and Georgias, maybe depth might be, but they're a lot better there now than they've been for the last few years. And it's going to take Jeff in Starkville. It's going to take him. Well, with the portal, it doesn't necessarily take that long, but you just got to have the wherewithal to do it. And I'm not sure that that State has gotten on the into the portal game. Well, I know they haven't. They hadn't gotten on it as quickly as Ole Miss, and Ole Miss has kind of pretty much showed everybody else the way to do it.
Yeah, and to your point, then I'll pitch to Rob. I almost feel like I'm manufacturing a reason to call it a weakness with Kiffin's Rebel team this year, and by that I mean, I don't have the granular knowledge of it that Yancey Porter and people like you have of studying their 2 and 3 deep. chart and looking, you almost have to go to a bunch of film. But when you bring these transfers in, to me, when we won't know for 4 or 5 games, I guess, if you bring that many transfers in, if I'm head coach, what I'm a little worried about is, can I make the locker room work? Like it's more, what you've got when you have these high school incoming players that comprise 70% of your roster. I think Georgia's still doing that a lot. Kiffin is making a living. He'll live or die with the portal gets, and many of them will be great, but some of them might prove to be too much in love with themselves. I'm not getting enough playing time. My NIL money is not what the other. And so can he manage the threats to cohesiveness of a team when you're that portal heavy with your roster?
Yeah, I definitely think that's a concern, but he sure seems to have the demeanor and skill of doing, and that may come from having, spent a few years in the NFL and living in the home with an NFL daddy for that long, because it really has become, I mean, let's face it, college football is the AAA of the NFL, and it's become more of that kind of business than what it used to be.
This is the 125th year of Mississippi State football, guys.
Yeah.
125.
Yeah, I mean, and Rick, along that lines, you look at what happened. 2014 was kind of the magical year in Mississippi, when that day, I think it was October 4th of 2014, when Mississippi, we were down in Lambert dove hunting that morning. 6 of us killed 78 doves, had lunch at Abe's Barbecue in Clarksdale. I had 2 big Abe's. We're watching A&M get knocked off by Mississippi State in Starkville. And later that day, unbeknownst to me, one of my sons had snuck down. He had just turned 16, and all of them had gone down to Oxford, and they ended up storming the field. That was a magical day in Mississippi. And I live in Memphis, so I've got a farm with lifetime hunting rights in Lambert in the Delta. I love that state. My grandparents are from Helena. I love the Delta. I grew up going to Destin with all the folks from Tutwiler and Sumner and all those little towns down there in the Delta, Tunica. And I go back and I think they are now at Ole Miss and Mississippi State. They've got money and they're getting serious about this. What's the ceiling? How high can they go in Mississippi?
This is, as you say, Ole Miss is really, I mean, this is the best they've been in a long time. And the highest I've seen them in a preseason SEC poll is what, 4th? Have you seen them higher than that?
Not higher than 4th.
I mean, and then you look at your 4th and you're ahead of LSU and Oklahoma and Tennessee. I'm gonna have to see it. I mean, and I think the schedule helps. I think the schedule helps them. It's not as brutal as it could be in that league, but it's going to be fun to watch. That's for sure. I mean,
Rick, wasn't State number 1 ranked with Dak Prescott at QB?
Yeah.
2014 for 5 and it was either
not
5
preseason either.
Yeah,
for 5 weeks.
In fact, they beat Auburn, was the game that where they got elevated. After that, they got elevated to number 1. I've said this a lot of times.
Too soon, Rob. Too soon.
What's that?
Too soon.
It's too soon to talk about that if you're an Auburn
I remember.
fan.
No, I remember. I was at that game, Rick, and that was
Furious
the
pass
raucous
interference
crowd.
calls.
Yeah.
Well, here's what I would say about that whole. That 2014 was magical in Mississippi. It did not end particularly well, but for 5 or 6 weeks, State was number 1 and Ole Miss was in the top 4, and that just doesn't happen. But what I'll say about that is that people said a lot about Dan Mullen and everything, but they can put that on his tombstone. He had
No doubt.
Mississippi State '1 in the nation for 5 weeks.
No
That's
doubt.
right.
Or yeah, for that matter, you could put it on Dak Prescott's tombstone too.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's why Dan is a flawed coach. Most of them are not named Nick Saban or possibly Kirby Smart. But I was just, I didn't see it coming, Rob and Rick, Brendan, that he would struggle that mightily at Florida. All the resources in the world in Gainesville. And I just thought, we're going to have a problem in the SEC with Mullen when he gets to Florida, because he already knew the Florida culture and had been mentored by Urban Meyer. I don't know why that didn't go more smoothly. Brendan, I'm sure, has a deep knowledge of that.
I think it was, Dan Mullen, kind of like a lot of coaches, I think his problem is doesn't think Dan Mullen's wrong. I mean, and I think Dan Mullen gets in his own way sometimes. It was no big secret when he was OC during the Meyer years that he was quirky, so he was an interesting guy. Not until he married his sweet wife, who's a wonderful lady, did he kind of normalize, and I think that's right around when he started becoming head coach. Dan's always, him and Tebow weren't all that tight. He's just an interesting guy, and I think it takes that kind of a personality. I mean, what do I know? But I mean, at the same time, as far as he's concerned, when he came back, to coach the head time, I had an interesting video. I caught Dan Mullen running on the field the very first time as a Florida Gator. So I had run down, I shoot video and, for on the sidelines during some home games. And there I am sitting at the, right about here come the Gators, and I'm sitting there and I'm like, I'm thinking I'm going to go get his face, because I wanted to see what his face looks like running on the field as the first time as a head coach at Florida Field. And his face was like, it became a viral video because his face was just, it was like in angst. And then all of a sudden it hits him. He's like, oh, here I am. And I think that's the thing. And I think that's the thing about coming to Florida. It's the ultimate fishbowl. It's got all the elements of a fishbowl. It's got smaller town, no professional team that anyone gravitates to, rich tradition, and then just, a la 92,000 plus screaming Gator fans at every single game. I think that is kind of, I think why personalities like his or don't really do all that well. What do you? I mean, Rick.
Real. Speaking of fishbowl, as you aptly described it, Brendan. I have no prediction, because if I were a Bama fan, I wouldn't give a rip what an Auburn guy's prediction was. But I do think there are parallels in Tuscaloosa, the fishbowl, and Kalen DeBoer he's been on a big stage already at Washington and in last year's 4-team playoff. He looks like he's more prepared to deal with the fishbowl perhaps than Mullen was following Urban Meyer. But that will for sure be a test, especially when you add the immediate succession year right after the GOAT.
Rick, talk about that, if you would, about, Kalen DeBoer coming in to take over for Nick Saban. I mean, I met him and talked to him like with everybody else at SEC Media Days. That's it. But you just have a way of seeing things that very few people do.
I'm real interested. I saw what he did with Michael Penix. I'm real interested to see what he does with Milroe, because they seem real similar as far as athleticism and being able to beat you with their legs as well as their arm. To me, it looks like a great hire, but I mean, you're talking about filling in some big shoes. These are the biggest since Bryant to me. Unbelievable. It looks like a good hire to me. I just don't. I mean, Kirby's got it going so well at Georgia. Bringing Texas and Oklahoma in, Kelly down at LSU. it's unbelievable how hard this league is going to be.
Yeah, and then you look at what Hugh Freeze is doing in recruiting at Auburn. That's just, the top 5 recruiting classes in the country right now are Ohio State 1, Bama 2, Georgia 3, LSU 4, and Auburn 5. I think A&M is 6 and Tennessee 7 or 8. Oklahoma is like 9. Rick, have you covered Oklahoma or Texas over the years? What are your thoughts about how do you see them fitting in when they're here? They're the new kids in the lunchroom on the first day of school.
You know, they're going to be really, really, really good. I mean, they always are. Texas is, you know, they've got everything in the world going for them, including Austin. You know, what a great place to go to school. The same. Having said that, I mean, you know, Georgia and Alabama and LSU, they ain't going away, and Florida's not going to be down forever. You know, I'm real interested to see. I thought Napier was going to be successful down there, and I'm interested to see what happens this year with him, because I assume he's got to win.
What do you think, Rick, is his been other than not having, the cupboards being bare, one guy going into the NFL last year, Ricky Pearsall. What do you think has been, if anything, what do you give him as a grade?
Well, right now it would be whatever's right next to F. I mean, he hadn't gotten it done. I mean, and it's he didn't come into the best situation, obviously, but what I like when I am assessing coaches, I like to talk to other coaches about what they think about them. And I had never heard anybody say anything bad about Napier. I mean, what he did at Lafayette was pretty amazing, and not that easy a job either. I don't know how your talent gets that down at Florida. I don't understand. I don't understand it. When you were Rob, when you were listing the teams and their recruiting, and the thing I was thinking when you were going, whatever it was, Georgia 1, Alabama 2, all through that, I'm thinking, meanwhile, Kiffin's just waiting till those guys get ready to make a move.
That's a great point.
Yeah. I mean, today that doesn't necessarily translate,
That's right.
Yeah.
You mentioned Kiffin.
Yeah.
I was going to put a multiple choice teaser to you gentlemen on a Friday. Can you believe, what are we, 15, 16 days from
15 days, yeah.
Most teams kick off. Feels weird to be August 31 and that sweltering humidity. We're going to need paramedics at all the games, especially the day games. But here's the multiple choice about Lane Kiffin, a coach that's, eccentric, worth every time he gets in front of a microphone. I'm interested in listening because you're going to get something controversial. And of course, in recent months, he's been very open and emotional, uncharacteristically a little bit emotional at the loss of his father, the great Monty Kiffin, rest his soul. But my question, and that of Ole Miss fans, obviously, and SEC rival fans, is what in his heart of hearts, what is Lane Kiffin's strategic plan in terms of tenure in Oxford at Ole Miss? And I don't care, he's so entertaining and capable. I don't care if he finishes his career there. My hunch is he may not. He's got he's heavily competitive, wants to win big, win the biggest prize out there. He can do that this year with Ole Miss potentially. But here's the multiple choice. Lane Kiffin stays at Ole Miss 5 more years is option A. Option B, Lane Kiffin leaves after 2024. And when you pick one of those or some other answer, if you wish, what intrigues me is I could see Lane, if he wins really big, makes the playoff, maybe makes the semi or national championship game, which is a monumental year. That's a brand building year for Ole Miss if he pulls that off, much less, winning it all. Which anytime Kiffin gets on the field, you got to be worried about what he can do to beat you. So he's certainly capable. He may have the horses to win the whole damn thing. Would he go ahead and cash in on a big year like that? Or if he has an unexpectedly disappointing year with a couple or three regular season losses that potentially knock him out of the playoff? Or is Kiffin, has he found his home there? He's settled in, and he's going to have a pretty long tenure there. We'll start with Rick.
There's no question, guys, that he has changed as a person over the last couple years. I mean, I think for the better. I mean, he's talked about not drinking and things like that, becoming more family oriented. I still would be shocked if he didn't make another move at some point.
Wow.
And if things don't work out for Napier at Florida, that might be a landing spot. That might be.
Yes, sir. I see that one too. I've been seeing that. Florida fans always been like years ago. We don't want that guy. We don't want that guy.
Yeah.
We don't want.
Yeah.
You take him now.
Hell yeah, I take him all day long.
Rick,
No doubt.
Rick, you don't think he's through?
I would be. It would. If you look at his track record over the years, and I've said he's changed, but I don't know that he. It would not be surprising to me to see him make one more move to a place where that traditionally has been a power. The place where all the infrastructure is already there, a bigger place. Ole Miss is not a bad place to live on $9 million a year.
Yeah.
But it is probably, you would think, if you looked over the course of, at least in modern football history, it's a lot easier to win at a Florida or Miami or another place that might be looking for a coach. And if I'm looking for a coach right now in these times of the portal and the NIL and all that, I don't know who looks more attractive than he does.
Yeah. That's exactly it. Rick, I want to ask you something about the money. I spend a lot of time in Oxford. I was down there for lunch last week up on the square with Yancey Porter, my friend with Rebel Yell Hotline, and went to the Tallahatchie Gourmet Grill. There's so many. That is an awesome place. My attorney had 2 condos on the square at Van Buren and the Ice House, and a big law office. And one of the things he told me was when Dickie Scruggs was the lead attorney in the tobacco settlement, I think Dickie Scruggs' settlement, his part was $700 million. There were like 14 other attorneys because my friend knew a lot of them. There was a couple that leased an office next to him. Their payout was $360 million over 15 years, and they had an office and they were getting $2 million a month, and they just wanted something to do. Well, that Grove Collective at Ole Miss has got deep ass pockets, and I think you talk about the number 3 ranked accounting school in America, great law school. It's hard to beat a Mississippi trained lawyer in the style of Matlock. You think about that. Rick, this is a different
Hey, Rob,
time,
real quick.
and I don't see Kiffin ever being. I think Ole Miss could match anybody's money. Is what I'm saying.
Rob, is before Rick answers you, I wanted to interject this, if you don't mind. Is Ole Miss NIL war chest up there with even the Georgias and Alabamas? That's shocking.
Well, they put $350 million on the side from a stadium renovation, didn't they, Rick? Just about 2 or 3 years ago, and said, "Hold on a second, let's see what we got." And then when Kiffin allegedly was flirting with Auburn or Auburn flirting with him. That Grove Collective exploded, over 11,000 members. It's a populist movement. But Rick, I want your thoughts on that, because that's a good question from Doug as well. But you know better than I, way better.
Facilities have become an afterthought now. I mean, you
Yeah.
got to get the players. That's
You're right.
it's the NIL money. I don't, these things are so secretive. I don't have any idea how much Ole Miss has. I would be shocked to find out that it has as much as Georgia or Alabama.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah, I would too.
or could sustain it for as long as Georgia and Alabama.
I'm
Well,
equally
Florida-
shocked, and I am told that Auburn, Rob, is knocking on the door, and when they want to, they can write the checks to the NIL, and that Auburn, when we don't recruit top 3 or 4 class, it's not because of money. That's what I'm told.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's come a long way since the days of Johnny Vaught and Bear Bryant and Vince Dooley, and it's a whole different ball game now.
I guess,
It
hey
is.
guys, have we seen the end? I say tongue in cheek, sort of the $100 handshake. Is that no more?
That's
No,
chump
Rick, that
change,
never
man.
happened, did it?
No, it never happened.
One of the great stories
Not in
in
the
this-
SEC.
one of the great stories in Mississippi football history is when Archie had finished at Ole Miss and was drafted by the Saints, and he and his agent, who was at the time was Frank Crossway, who was an Indianola attorney, and they set up a meeting at Coach Vaught's house with a guy named Vic Schwenk, who was the general manager of the Saints. And they first had some small talk, and then finally somebody said, "Well, what's your first offer?" And Schwenk gave whatever it was, and Vaught had been sitting over there quiet on the couch, and he just intoned. He said, "God dang, guys, he made more than that at Ole Miss."
Oh, God.
He's not taking a pay cut to come to New Orleans.
Hey guys,
wow.
that's so funny, Rick. Hey Rob, we need to take Rick to dinner at some nice establishment in Memphis or Birmingham or wherever you want. We could tell some stories when we don't have a microphone in front of us. But
Yeah.
I'll tell you what's going to be an out-of-body experience, at least for me and some fans, is when we get closer to early November and the rankings are taking the pretenders and the contenders are separating themselves, and it's going to sound like the final or like March Madness selection. We're going to have on this 12-team playoff the first 4 in, last 4 out. Who's a bubble team?
Yeah.
And I heard the great Tom Luganbill comment. I don't disagree with him, that much as it might not be fair in terms of degree of difficulty in the schedules in the SEC with the brutal gauntlet that we have, to an extent, the Big Ten, the same thing, not like the SEC, but close. It will be very difficult for the SEC or Big Ten to get more than 3 teams in. And it's just the nature of the automatic qualifiers. And so you're going to see, I think you can't lose more than 2 regular season games. And that's doubly the case if you're going to be unlucky. And you'll see what I mean. Unlucky that, let's say you're 10-2 at the end of the regular season, and your reward is you get to go play Georgia and Atlanta, or if Georgia doesn't prevail, which they should, as the best team in the SEC, then you get to go play someone like Alabama or a really good, could be a really good Ole Miss team, and you could lose that and get your 3rd loss and kind of unfairly get knocked out of the playoff. But they've got those automatic qualifiers, and it looks like there's only 3 teams left. After, let's say the SEC and Big Ten get 3 in, then you've got automatic qualifiers. If you do the math, they're going to feel a lot of political pressure to spread the love to some teams that are not in these 2 big power conferences. You guys agree?
Rick, yeah. What do you think?
Yeah, I do. I do agree with that. If you're going to try right now in today's college football, if you're going to have a 12-team playoff and you're not going to have more than 3 teams from the SEC, then pretty obviously at least 1 or 2 of the top 12 teams in college football aren't going to be in the playoffs because you could probably get half of the 12-team field from the SEC. I mean, if you're talking about how good they really are.
Yes.
Just
I mean,
like
that's
why
how good it
wasn't Georgia in the 14 playoff a year ago? I mean, they're 1 loss to Alabama.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm not so sure they weren't the best team in the country.
I agree with you.
With a
Rick-
healthy Brock.
Yeah. Rick, Georgia went. I was over there at Mercedes-Benz Stadium last year for the SEC championship. I actually saw people trying to scalp paper tickets because they're all online now. So I saw a lot that day. But Georgia can't beat Alabama. Their last win over Bama was 2007 in Nick Saban's first year. But Georgia went from 1 to 6 last year. That was tough. You voted in polls. You were a Heisman voter, I would bet, correct?
I've been a Heisman voter forever. Yeah.
Exactly. Let me ask you this. Last Friday we had, you remember Darren McFadden played for Arkansas.
Yeah, sure.
Had him on the show last Friday.
Great
Absolutely.
running back.
Yeah, and Tim Horton, my friend, coached him at Arkansas, and then Tim was at Auburn for 6 years. I mean, it's not often you have a guy. Darren McFadden, after the show, thanked us for having him on the show. I'm like, hey, man, I think it's the other way around. Thank you. But he's so courteous, and that's kind of the hallmark of Tim Horton's kids. Every time I've been around his players, they walk up, shake your hand, yes or no, sir, yes, ma'am, no, ma'am, look you in the eye. Rick, who are some of your favorite players you've covered over the years? And by the way, I got to ask this question because I just got a text from an Arkansas fan. 2006, 2007, Darren McFadden was a runner-up in the Heisman to Troy Smith. The next year, Tim Tebow. Did you give your Heisman vote to Darren McFadden, or just if you want to tell us? If you don't worry about it.
You know, I'm going to tell you something that probably won't sound too good. I don't remember. I don't remember who I voted for. Here's the year I remember. The year I remember best.
Peyton Manning.
I do remember that one. But the year I remember best is the year that Flutie won.
84.
84. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I voted for Jerry Rice because I had seen him play 5 times during the season, and he was clearly the best football player in America. I mean, you didn't have to be Newt Rockne or Bear Bryant to figure that out. I mean,
but did he throw a Hail Mary pass with no time left?
So he was so much better than everybody else. And so I get a call at my office. I had written a column saying that I had voted for Jerry Rice, and I got a call in my office, and it's this Boston radio station, and they've got me on live.
Oh God!
And they got me on live, and they said somebody sent us your column where you said you voted for Jerry Rice to win the Heisman Trophy over Doug Flutie. And I said, yeah. He said, why would you do that? That's incredible. Why would you do that? And I just said, it says to vote for the most outstanding player in college football. The most outstanding player I saw was Jerry Rice. And what is this? This is 40 years later. I rest my case.
You know? I would say the NFL vindicated you.
Well, but if the rest of the country had seen him in college, they would have known then. I mean, it was unbelievable. I mean, he was catching 24, 25 balls, 4 and 5 touchdowns a game.
Yeah.
And you can say, yeah, but that was just the SWAC. Well, that league has produced more NFL cornerbacks and safeties than, especially back in the 80s and 70s. I mean, they were half the NFL was
Yeah.
defensive backfields were SWAC guys.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I mean,
Rick,
I knew how good he was.
since you've been open book, and I don't want to put you on the spot, but you have to worry about being accused of regional bias, and I think there is regional bias in Heisman voting by some of the voters. I think some like you really do their best to say, who do I consider the most outstanding player this year, and kind of regardless of the conference they're in, the size of the school, like in the case of Jerry Rice. But I imagine it was a fairly easy vote for you in the case of Joe Burrow 2019, maybe Cam Newton 2010. Am I right?
Yeah, I voted for both of them. Yeah.
You're a smart man.
Yeah,
You're smarter than I thought.
Yeah. Yeah, I voted for both of them. I think you could make the case that Joe Burrow's senior season at LSU is the best season that any college football player's ever had.
It was electric.
It was.
It was unbelievable. I mean, he just did everything. I mean, he was perfect. I mean, he really was unbelievable.
Rick, I want to back you up on the Jerry Rice. I thank you, because as a kid growing up in Memphis, we were reading your stuff, okay, about, wasn't his quarterback Willie World Be Free Totten?
It was Willie. He was called Satellite. Jerry World Rice.
Yeah,
they were coached by Archie the Gunslinger Cooley with an offensive line that was nicknamed Tons of Fun.
I mean, but you were, Doug and Brendan, in Memphis. I had some clients over the years from Starkville, and they said, Jerry Rice is from Starkville, and when you voted for him, that was proof that you did your research. I remember talking to Buddy Davidson, former SID at Auburn, back years ago. And this was when Pat Dye first came to Auburn. I met him at a baseball game. I was down there my junior year, and Dad and I, you could walk out to practice. I mean, we were out there at practice one day. Governor Fob James was standing next to us after work. He came over, and I saw Bud Casey grab George Peoples by the face mask and bang his head, and blood went everywhere. He goes, "That's how you hit somebody in the Southeastern Conference, son. You knocked the out of them." And so Buddy Davidson was telling me about the Heisman Trophy the way it used to be. He said in 1971, he said, back then, Rob, he goes, you went to New York. You took the show on the road. He goes, so we all have our sit down with Howard Cosell. And he goes, I've got all the stuff about Pat Sullivan going into the 71 season to win the Heisman Trophy. He says, Howard Cosell looks at him and goes, Buddy, it's an impressive resume. I'll give you that. But how is a kid from a private school in Atlanta going to win the Heisman Trophy? Howard, Auburn is a state university in Alabama. He goes, whatever. But nonetheless, Ed Marinero is the choice of the Eastern press, and you'll be hard-pressed to beat him. And Pat Sullivan, when John Ott from the Downtown Athletic Club handed that envelope Thanksgiving night, 1971, halftime of the Georgia Tech-Georgia game. He goes, one winner here. The winner is Pat Sullivan, Auburn. Congratulations, Pat. I didn't know you spelled Auburn with an O, Auburn. But, Rick, have you ever been to the Downtown Athletic Club? At that dinner, here it is. It looked like a Dean Martin roast. Sans Foster Brooks up there, There's Pat Sullivan, Shug Jordan, and John Wayne with a cocktail and a cigarette in the other hand. God love those days, man.
I've been several times. I went with Eli Manning. I went when Rice was a finalist, and I went when Steve McNair was a finalist.
Yeah,
and I voted for Steve McNair too. And we were at the press conference the day before, where all the players are sitting around, all the finalists are sitting around a table, and they ask each one of them who should win. And Warren Sapp was sitting across the table from McNair. And when they asked him, he said, shit, man, have you seen this guy? And he pointed, have you seen the film on this guy? And he pointed at McNair. He said, there's only one guy that should win this. And yeah, you remember who won that year? Rashad Salam. And
Yeah.
Steve McNair not only was a better runner than Rashad Salam, he was also could throw it like nobody's business too.
Yeah.
I mean, he was the best player. That's the reason I voted for him.
Yeah. Mississippi per capita has put more players in the NFL than any state in America.
It has. It
Powerful
has
stuff.
also more NFL
Oh, wow.
Hall of Famer, Pro Football
Yeah.
Hall of Famers per capita
Yeah.
than any state.
Making my point earlier for you, back to the Heisman, I'm probably being too hard on the voters. They've got a thankless job in some ways, and they get a lot of pressure. ESPN is not ashamed to put enormous pressure on how the voting should go. So I hope they continue to those voters think independently like you, Rick. But some years, the Heisman, the sense of fairness of the Heisman voting and selection does not do itself favors. I submit to you 1985. Will someone help me understand how that would the several word phrase was used in announcing Bo Jackson in the closest vote in the history of the Heisman? Chuck Long coming in second, and at Iowa. And since then, kind of like you were saying about Manning and other Jerry Rice in the NFL. Bo didn't have a great NFL career, and we know why. He split his time baseball, and then injury got him. But all that's happened with Bo Jackson in the decades since he played is he's continuously referred to as the greatest college football player in the game, or at least up there with guys like Herschel Walker and whoever else you want to add to a really short list. So I don't know how years like that happen. But you have to wonder about regional bias, or maybe there's sympathetic stories. I think if memory serves, Chuck Long had a younger brother that was battling serious illness, and that's touching, but it's not the Heisman voting criteria.
Yeah. The regional bias term. I mean, I voted for Penix last year. I thought he was the best all-around player. I had the Georgia tight end number 2, by the way.
I assume you didn't go to Baton Rouge for a little while after that vote.
What's that now?
I said, I assume after your vote, you waited a little while to be in Baton Rouge. Jaden Daniels winning it, of course.
Well, but he's a terrific player. But what the guy at Washington did, I thought was every bit as good. I mean,
no doubt.
But I'm just saying that what I'm trying to say is it sounds like, because I've said I voted for Jerry Rice and Steve McNair and Peyton Manning, that there's regional bias, but I don't necessarily. I have voted for a lot of people from other parts of the country.
Yeah.
Rob,
well, yeah.
Go ahead, Rob.
No, I was just going to say, Rick, I think it's like the guy that my son just met with that bought NVIDIA stock at 29 cents a share and held it. And his holdings are now worth $151 million. You are not afraid to be different and think outside the box. And I respect that. And that's why it's such an honor to have you on here as one of these, Mount Rushmore journalists. And, Brendan's dad, Buddy Martin, told me the other day, he said, you need to get Rick Cleveland on there. He goes, he and Ron Higgins, they're friends. They know each other. This is what's missing today. You know what I'm saying? Everybody's trying to do a quick 600-700 word column. Sometimes when Tony Barnhart's on here, he goes, Rob, sometimes it takes 3,500 words. Yeah. And I respect that. Doug, go ahead.
Well, I was going to ask you guys to pivot. I know I'm sort of I'm in the head of your viewers and listeners, and we're sitting here 15, 16 days, really sooner than that, of probably one of those weird Thursday night games. But if you just stick to the SEC for now, in a poll that's preseason and unofficial and not worth much. No surprise that Georgia and Ohio State sit at the top of, and Ryan Day better win this year. If you look at the roster he's bought, as if he's the New York Yankees philosophically, but
Yep.
LSU curiously down at 13th, and the reason I say curious, they're LSU's. You know, you can be a mediocre head coach and win a national championship at LSU, and I'm not calling Nick Saban mediocre. I was referring to Coach O, and for that one year, Coach O was great. And you could argue, is Les Miles really an elite coach? And he won a national championship. So, to me, look at the schedule, study this a little closer. And LSU has, to me, a pretty big advantage. They get Bama, Ole Miss, a very good Ole Miss team, and Oklahoma. All three of those go to Death Valley in Baton Rouge. So, if they get just slightly above average QB play from Nussmeier, and then their defense doesn't have to be top 10 in the nation, but if they're top 20 or 30, and they could be, they've got players. I think LSU could be the talk of the playoff selection by mid to late October.
I agree 100%. That's why I said earlier when people are talking about Ole Miss and this being their year, well, they're fourth in the preseason poll, and look at the teams that are behind them, and LSU's one of those.
Yeah.
I think right now, if you ask, that I think they're a little bit better. I think Ole Miss is a little bit better than LSU, but it wouldn't shock me at all for LSU to finish better.
And, Rob, I don't want to make the last thing you need demographically is to alienate any Alabama or Georgia fans in this audience. But if you step back, and I'm not seeking to make them mad, but I'm just talking about the football brand of the SEC. We talk about it being deep and talented down to maybe 9 or 10 teams that are capable. Maybe that's more like 6 or 7 realistically. But in some ways, this year or next year, it would be great for the brand of SEC football if we had a little shock and awe. In this case, shock and awe would be neither Alabama or Georgia winning 10 games regular season to kind of be automatic in the playoff. I think that's maybe 10 to 15% likely to even occur. I think both Alabama and Georgia, when the dust settles, should be in the playoff.
Yeah.
But if you look at teams that could rise up, why not LSU? I already mentioned them. Why not Texas? The way they're loaded, Quinn Ewers, coached by a play caller like Sarkisian. Why not Mizzou? Mizzou's an upstart in this league, but what didn't you say, Rob? That their first year to join the SEC, they made the SEC championship game.
Well, the second and third year they did. Yeah,
second, third year. My bad.
Yeah, that was just incredible.
And then Ole Miss, but Texas A&M loaded up on 5 stars, and that's just been forgotten. And there's a reason players get rated 5-star if they finally get some coaching and experience. So if Connor Wegman is what we think, they could be rolling into Jordan-Hare Stadium November 23rd, same day that Alabama's on the road at Oklahoma. Texas A&M potentially could be playing for something big in that game in Jordan-Hare, and I hope it's a night game. That would be electric. So I hope it's a year where there are a few surprises and we don't spend 3 months simply talking about, will Georgia even lose a game? Now, if they do, I'll tip my hat to Kirby Smarty. He is riding high, and God, they've built a machine over there in Athens right now.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable the talent level that they have. When they come out on the field, you think, God dang, that's an NFL. I mean, they look like an NFL team. I mean, they do. They really do. And I'm
look good coming off the bus, right?
Oh God, yeah. And then they play a little bit faster than everybody else too. They're third string running back, and right now I can't think of the kid's name, but he's from 15 miles north of Jackson, little place called Gluckstadt, Mississippi. Their third string running back is one of the best specimens who've ever came through here. I mean, he
Yeah.
looks like Bo.
Yeah.
Uh,
Wow.
I'm drawing a blank on the kid's name, but he is
It's not
just,
Cam Akers, but I mean, that sounds like Cam Akers almost.
sounds like,
Almost sounds like Cam Akers, but he didn't go
oh,
to,
he's
Georgia.
so
Yeah.
much bigger than Cam. This kid
God,
is.
wow.
He scored a touchdown in the national championship game year before last, and then he had a knee injury and set out most of last year, and I can't think. But trust me, you're going to hear about him.
Yeah. Rick, I got another one I want to ask you about is in Mississippi, the top 40, the Clarion Ledger would have their top 40 players. What is it? What's the academic ruling that's different in Mississippi compared to Alabama and the neighboring states? Because so many of those top players you don't hear about. Of course, now you go back 30 years ago, we sweated bullets worrying about who was going to be eligible, Prop 48 and stuff like that. But can you make some sense out of that? I know they have 17 junior colleges in Mississippi, and that helps.
Well, yeah, but it's fewer. You're seeing fewer and fewer players. To me, it's not near. The junior colleges aren't producing in the numbers they were before because for whatever reason the kids are, they identify them in the 9th and 10th grade and they get them eligible. They tutors, force feeding, and there are fewer and fewer players that aren't academically eligible for the colleges now.
Yeah. Yeah. That's,
I mean,
yeah.
now you get a few, you get a few, but I mean, it's like the East Mississippi over here in Scuba.
Yeah.
Has produced so many players over the years. It's not, I mean, there were years where there were 8, 9 D1 signees. I mean, high quality D1 signees out of there, but I don't think you see those numbers now.
Yeah. That's a good point. When we drive down to Orange Beach, we go on 45. I call that the land that time forgot. Of course, that's the old way we used to take from Destin. We'd stop in Meridian and go to Weinman's restaurant that had the big whiskey barrels up there you'd sit on.
Shorty McWilliams' place, yeah.
Okay. And, and I love watching those documentaries when there's one Saturdays in the South, the 8-part series the SEC Network produced back in 2019. And they're talking, and Pat Dye's on there, and he's talking about, how radio was so big back then. And I still am a radio junkie. And he said, hell, we were listening to Pula Hubert games at night. We stay up there. We didn't have no damn social media. Did
Leonard's
you know Coach
Losers.
Dye? Yeah.
Remember that?
You do what?
Leonard's Losers.
Oh, Leonard's Losers. Let's bring it back. He goes, the folks in Stockville are going to gather in the junction Saturday. They'll be cooking ribs and all kinds of things that ever ran, flew, swam, or crawled. And when Mississippi State comes out, they're going to ring them bells, and the Bulldogs are going to win by a touchdown Saturday night. I love that. We need that.
Take a smart pill, he liked to say.
Smart pills, yeah.
we need to get back, Rick, to having fun. I remember in TV 30 years ago saying I wanted to do a back to the basics movement. This was in 89 and 90 and 91, the days of Chris Schenkel and the long fishing poles that would have the manual scores put up there. And you had nobody could be on TV more than 5 times over a 2-year period. As Keith Donovan, the historian for college football, he says, he goes, there was somewhat of a television aristocracy, you would call it. And we saw these teams, and they were bigger than life. And, I talked to Logan Young III a lot. He's a good friend. And just he talks about Brown, how growing up, he said, Johnny Majors would be at the house. I'd come home, and there's Barry Switzer and Jimmy Johnson. I'm eating dinner with these guys. That's what I grew up. Brother Oliver living in the guest house out back when he coached with the Showboats, and with Billy Donovan and Logan Young had that team. And I hope you will write till you're 110 because you have a presence about you. I knew Shelby Foote because Huggy and I went to PDS together. In second grade, I went home and I saw his father. And I got home, my mother goes, "Did you meet his father?" I go, "Yes, ma'am." She goes, "Do you know who that man is?" I said, she goes, "He is the most preeminent writer of our history in America." And he was sitting in a chair. I kid you not. I remember this. I got a photographic memory. Was smoking a pipe and drinking. It wasn't water. I'm sure it was scotch in the history and the tradition of all great Southern writers. But we need you, Rick, not to ever retire because isn't this cool having him on, Doug?
100%.
I love this.
Shelby Foote, it was bourbon, by the way.
Yeah. Okay.
It's bourbon. I met him through Willie Morris, so
Rick, where can our listeners find your writing these days, sir?
MississippiToday.org. And we're a online newspaper, and we're a 501c3. So actually, any newspaper in Mississippi can pick up anything I write. So I never know who's running.
Well,
the
you know what?
Paper, the Coast paper, Hattiesburg paper, they all.
Yeah.
I love that. And my organization's a 501c3, but we're a hospital. If you can't turn a profit in the newspaper business, then become a 501c3.
Well, our group, we won the Pulitzer Prize last year.
Wow.
I mean, we're doing good work in a state that needs good work, newspaper work.
Yeah. Well, we need more writers, Doug. I know you got to get going, but Doug and Rick, if you'll hang on for just a couple more minutes, we'll beat them at Doug. Awesome stuff as always. Absolutely love it.
Yes, sir. Rick, it's an honor to spend the show with you, sir. Have a great weekend.
Yeah, y'all take care. Thank you.
Thank you, Rick. Hang on a second, and I'm gonna close out with you. I wanted to thank you again for coming on because, we have Lauren Smith on from Georgia a lot, and Lauren was the sideline reporter forever. Now he does a 3.5-hour pregame show on the Georgia Network. And about 3 years ago, I was over in Athens for the Kentucky-Georgia game. Billy Roberts and I, my roommate from Auburn, lives over in Brookhaven. We went to see him, and there was an endless line of people to get their picture with Lauren or an autograph. And you think about Larry Munson, and he goes, 91 seconds left, dogs in a fight. Don't give up. Let's go down on the field. Lauren, what do you got? Well, there, Georgia just in a hell of a dogfight here with Florida. They can't stop that. All right, that's enough. Hey, 91 seconds left. If you've ever thought about do or die, we got to live. Georgia's got to hunker down. Now here we go. They're going to come to the line. Baloo's going to walk up there. We need Stan Torgensen. You think about John Ferguson. Did you grow up? My dad introduced me to White's Radio Log as a kid. And Dad is 96. He's watching the show right now. My mom's 89. He watches every show every day. That's how we learned. It was like, could you imagine if you'd been in the Sistine Chapel watching Michelangelo paint those frescoes on the ceiling? I mean, we've got to have the writers and we've got to have the radio to tell the stories, don't we?
Absolutely. I mean, Jack
Crystal.
Jack Crystal, man, not good. It doesn't get any better than Jack.
No. But
there were so many of those guys from that era. I don't know that we'll. I am glad that I spent the bulk of my career during that time and not now.
Yeah,
I like the college football of the 60s, 70s, 80s, and even into the 90s a whole lot more than I have had the 21st century. That's just, I don't know. I mean, I remember at the SEC meetings, playing poker with, you might be playing with Billy Brewer and 2 or 3 other SEC coaches.
Yeah.
Now, they're sequestered.
Yeah.
There's not that much. You don't really get to know the people the way you used to.
Yeah.
The locker rooms were open. Everything. It was just a different day. The access was better. I'm sounding like an old fogey, but that's
You're not.
just the way I feel. Yeah.
You're a truth broker. I mean, that's and I think about Jack Crystal, 58 years. Remember when he retired? He got up there and he said, "I want to thank you for all the great years here of Mississippi State football and the dreams I've lived." He said, "My parents were two immigrants that came from Latvia and Lithuania. Jewish immigrants came to America with the clothes on their back. And I've lived this great life. I live in the greatest country in the history of the world." And how many times did you hear him say, "There's movement of the aisles here in Scott Field and Starkville, Mississippi. Wrap this one in maroon and white." I mean, Jack Crystal, just a true, just iconic figure. I think of Jim Fife and Rod Bramlett at Auburn, Stan Torgenson, David Kellum. David Kellum in his own right is really good. I will remember driving down Highway 75 in Parkin, Arkansas on a Sunday afternoon. I got so nervous I had to get out and drive, watching Ole Miss win the national championship in Omaha. And he goes, "If you've ever worn the red and the blue of Ole Miss, it's time to celebrate." I mean, he was in tears, and this is big time stuff. And I think too about after the game, when the sports writers, we would always see at a press conference, whatever, in there, like Ron Higgins was talking by the locker room, getting the raw reaction of the players without it all being scripted and managed. Yeah.
Can I tell you one quick?
Yeah. And then we'll let you go. And I appreciate you staying so long with
Crystal
us.
Story.
Yeah.
Jack's over at Auburn doing a football broadcast. The Bulldogs are behind 28-0 in the second quarter. Somebody comes by the radio booth from Auburn and says, "Bob Hope's doing a show here tonight. You can have him for 5 minutes at halftime if you want him." And Crystal turned around and said, "Fella, I could use some hope right now."
I mean, I heard a story about Jack Crystal from Buddy Martin, it's my friend Bo Carter. Bo Carter is writing this story, Tales of Mississippi State Athletics. And he said, one time Jack Crystal and the Mississippi State crew were doing a game in Gainesville at the Swamp, and there was no AC, and you're up there in a metal box, and it was so hot they had stripped down to their boxers and were broadcasting the game, and it was like 150 up there. But, reading, I always say this, is like lifting weights with your brain. And I love you're a laid back, it's pure Mississippi, pure Southern. I absolutely love it. And I love the fact that you went on that station in Boston and told them, "Well, I'm find the best player. I did it." And we thank you so much for sharing your time with us and want to do it again. May have to get you and Ron Higgins on here together next time. Ron, somebody said, Buddy Martin the other day said, if he ever stops writing, he needs to do stand-up in addition to it, because he went on a Floyd R. Turbo American from the Johnny Carson show rant the other night. It was classic about access, and you are so right. So, again, one more time, tell them how they can follow you, and we'll see y'all on the show Monday.
MississippiToday.org, O-R-G, and it's doesn't cost you a dime.
Mississippi.org?
MississippiToday.org.
MississippiToday.org. I'll be following you from now on. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. We'll see y'all Monday. Check us out.
Care.
You too. Thank you.
In a perfect world, you'd set a health goal and results would happen overnight. In this world, the real world, it takes time, dedication, and the right support to achieve your best self. The Vitamin Shop's health enthusiasts are here to make sure you're not wasting a single moment on the wrong supplements. From the highest quality sports nutrition and superfoods to the most sought after trends, you'll find a huge variety of science-backed solutions for every goal, and the people to help guide you along the path to greatness.
Unbelievably, every 2 minutes in our communities, a child is either bought or sold for sex. I am Ari Dickey, board member for the Nashville Anti-Human Trafficking Coalition. Join me and millions of others in our fight against human trafficking and for its victims by helping to educate the most vulnerable among us, our middle and high school students. Go to nhtcoalition.org, become a partner, and help keep our families safe, because none of God's children are for sale.